Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
Oh, doing well.
Good.
And I think there was a debate last night, but I have to confess, I didn't last very long.
Yeah, me neither.
But what I noticed was the tone was different.
Yeah.
But the honesty wasn't.
No.
It was still just filled with dishonesty. But that's just my personal opinion. But it's just hard to all of a sudden start believing the politicians because most of the ones I knew, they were nice to your face, but a lot of them were lying to themselves. That's where the real problem comes. They lie to themselves about economics and foreign policy to the point where they come around believing this. They believe it's in America's best interest to have an empire and take on wars, and all the wars we fought in the last 100 years all were necessary or we would lose our freedoms. So we fight the wars and we do all this stuff and we still lose our freedoms in the process. But anyway, there was an announcement that the Democrats, you have to say the Democrats, is not the presidential commission. I mean, that's no more fair and balanced than the man in the moon. So they changed the rules, and and I don't think they got an agreement with the Republicans. They changed the rules that it wouldn't be a debate like most people think about it in a room, and they played games before, always pretending that things are much, much worse than they really are. Anyway, because they're dangerous, I don't know why they're the only two that are in danger are the two candidates. I wonder where this love came from that they have to protect them. But the Democrats didn't want it, so they said that it'll just be not a live debate.
Yeah,
It'd be
virtual.
A virtual debate over the computer. And can you believe it? Trump didn't even like that idea. He said, no way. He's not going to waste his time on it. And he's right about that. The trouble is the Republicans will agree with him and the Democrats won't, but maybe there's somebody out there with an independent mind. But the change, it's amazing that they were able to pull that off and just announce it with the whole idea of making Trump look bad. But that kind of stuff makes Trump look bad. It's a reflection of a powerful media, but it also distracts from the fact that the people are very gullible. Why they should think this is terrible that Trump he's chickening out.
Yeah.
And besides, all he wants to do is spread the virus. So to me, it's a big issue. It's a big talk, and I'm sure Trump is not going to change his mind.
And it shows how political the virus is, and this is what we keep talking about, the two separations, one, the actual medical situation, and two, the real political situation. And what's interesting here, Dr. Paul, is the timeline. I think the timeline tells all. Let's look at that first clip that I have up. This is October 6th. Biden says there shouldn't be a second debate if Trump still has COVID-19. Then just 2 days later, go to the next clip. Just 2 days later, the Commission on Presidential Debates. They announced the second presidential debate will be virtual in order to protect the health and safety of all involved. With the second presidential debate scheduled for October 15th, the Commission on Presidential Debates announced the following, They're going to have remote locations. And as you say, here's Trump. They basically just put it up on their website. And here's the third one, and here's Trump campaign's reaction to this. This is the same day. This is today, actually. The Trump campaign statement on unilateral decision. They said, starts off with all the fluff, of course. Trump won the first debate despite a terrible and biased moderator and Chris Wallace, But they make a good point by unilaterally canceling an in-person debate. That's not what debates are about or how they're done. Here are the facts. President Trump will have posted multiple negative tests prior to the debate, so there's no need for this unilateral declaration. The safety of all involved can easily be achieved without canceling a chance for voters to see both candidates go head-to-head. We'll pass on this sad excuse to bail out Joe Biden, and we'll do a rally instead. And that's pretty interesting because it does bring up the issue of kind of a rigged process.
You know, one of our complaints always from the far left and the big government people is they don't understand the principle of contract, because a lot of problems in a free market is settled and it moves along because of contracts and people have to live up to their promises. But in this case, this is a typical example. There was an agreement, I would think, that should have some moral merit to it, and it was just cast aside without even a discussion. But I think Trump's idea of a rally is a good one. But I'd like it to be in some atmosphere. It's outdoors and just a lot of room and a wind blowing and on private property. The private property seems to have a tinge of respect left in it. You know, sometimes if you say, I'm in a private house, my building here, get out of my way. And some people have won on this in court rather than saying, when it becomes public property, that's the whole problem, is everything becomes public. And the public is who's ever in charge, whoever has the most power. So public is just a definition for vagueness, and whoever can get the power, they get to tell him what to do. So it's something that I don't know what he'll do, and he's not going to be able to rent a building any place. You know, that have the what are they going to do? Send in the army? Oh yeah, the president send in the army to enforce these laws. So.
Maybe he can have him on one of his
No,
golf
but
courses.
I don't know whether that'll come about. But I think he, you know, his goal ought to be to have the biggest rally ever.
Yeah.
And, but he needs a few acres.
Well, he's got a couple golf courses. Maybe that'll work.
Yeah, there you go.
Put some golf in there. The thing that's funny is, and one of the things, and we don't want to sound like cheerleaders because we're not. Although debates are important, it's important to see them go head to head. But the funny thing, if you remember in 2016, everything they said to try to wrong foot Trump, hilariously, he turned it against them. And that was his great, this is going to finally destroy his candidacy. And he turns it around and makes lemonade. And so I'm thinking about this. The optics of this are not that awfully great for Biden, I think. And I think it actually works to Trump's advantage. And I think for three reasons. First of all, it emphasizes Trump's vigor. That, hey, I had it, I got over it, I'm ready to debate. I feel good, is what he said. It undermines the narrative that a COVID case is a death sentence. That here's a person in the high-risk category, his age, his weight, who knows what else. High-risk category, he got over it very quickly. And the third, it underscores Biden as a weak candidate. And I think you can almost hear Trump making fun of Biden at this rally that's going to take place. He's still hiding in his basement. He's weak. He can't lead the country. So I think by doing this, they think that they're pulling Biden's chestnuts out of the fire. But in fact, I think Trump is going to make lemonade out of these lemons.
Yeah, right. You know, I think it came up last night, but it has in this discussion about whether Trump will follow the election. And, you know, he raised this question. He essentially, what I hear is, you know, if it's outright dishonest and there's a lot of fraud and there are millions of votes not counted, you know, he doesn't have to automatically accept it. A lot of times they don't. But throwing it back to the Democrats, listen, what you're worrying about who's going to live up to the next election. You guys just spent 3 years trying to undermine and say you don't accept the last election. Yeah, so that does silence a bunch of them. So. But unfortunately, they're at an impasse, and it has been said frequently now that it's not likely that too many dedicated Democrats are going to switch their position the same way with the Trump supporters. But maybe there are some independent souls out there that haven't even thought about this yet, and maybe something will shake them up. But you know, there was a couple comments here that I want to bring up in the debates last night. Just to talk about the issues that were considered important. The COVID response that came up. That's been a big issue, you know, with Trump and Biden as well. And this article was, you know, picking and choosing who won this. In this particular article, they said, Pence won. But my argument is nobody won that. They didn't even talk about what we talk about. And Trump's position is the right one, and he won. But he has to, modify that because he may, lean in our direction, but he really doesn't. he's not been able to, at least, to really follow the issue of herd immunity, and a more natural immunity. He talks about the vaccines and all the medications and everything, and but I also understand the position he's in. But I think that I think that they didn't touch that. They haven't, and that's one of our problems. And that whole debate needs to be crystallized. And the American people, I think, they're very confused because we're doing it, and we'll do it today too. Is bring up the people who have been on our side and how they get silenced.
Yeah, I think Pence was weak on COVID. As he's always done throughout his career, in a way, has accepted the conventional wisdom, didn't give it a lot of thought. He should know better. He should understand the shifting rationale and the shifting view. He accepts the failed previous positions, and he also does something. He did something, and I know you recognize it too. And Trump is guilty of this too. We talk about politicization of the virus. We usually blame the Democrats for that because they do it, but the Republicans are bad as well. And he used it as an example, as an opportunity to politicize the virus in their rabid, irrational hatred of China. Trump was good on it. He shut down China immediately. These Chinese are going to pay. They're terrible people. And it really is it's a pretty weak performance.
Well, and that was an issue that did come up in debate, and this particular article was had the impression that Pence won on this, but they were arguing about the same thing. Both wanted to be tough, and
I was tougher. You were tougher. Yeah.
Who's the toughest? Who can ever? And the only thing I can think of is my personal experience of when I was in high school. Of course, China was the enemy, but it was different. We were on their borders with troops, so the whole thing. But now it seems like we're going out of our way, and nobody can be soft on China.
Yeah.
You got to be this. And Trump is not bashful about that. Even though at the beginning he was more open to a discussion, but I guess he had to switch because the media was so strong and emphasizing, the reason why we can't possibly have a movement toward, voluntary trade with China because they're communists and they're interventionists and they're planners and this sort of thing. But anyway, that was an issue that came up. But I don't think those who thought that Trump really won on this because he was the toughest, I don't think that adds much positive understanding to what's going on. But another issue that came up with the economy in general, the conservatives thought for sure, Pence won on this, and the main thing they emphasized was the only thing they could emphasize was, less regulations and less taxes. But then if you put that in a scheme of things, and we've tried on this program to make the point that spending has to be a tax on the system, not a tax in the sense they get a bill, but it is a tax on the system because it has to be paid for, because it's run up debt and the Fed prints this money. I've mentioned this before, but I get a little charge out of this thing when the Federal Reserve comes and they're having trouble with monetary policy, and they say, well, we've done our share. That's as much as we can do. It's up to the Congress now. They should spend more money and stimulate the economy. And the economy is up and down this past week because there's ambivalence on whether they're going to print $1 trillion or $2 trillion and this sort of thing. So, but what they don't want to recognize is if the Congress does what the Fed wants and spends $2 trillion more and pass it out, they sell Treasury bills and the Fed buys them. So it's really a farce. But my conclusion from what I understand, about last night's debate is there was no offer and no contracts between central economic planning, the type we have now, and super strong economic planning with more and more. But it's a modification of the same philosophy that the Federal Reserve and the Congress and all the regulatory bodies, they're interventionists and they're economic planners, and you just need to change the managers. Well, they're missing the point. We need to change the philosophy of the economy, and whether we have voluntarism in the economy or whether it should be run by authoritarian bureaucrats and politicians.
Yeah, that's the case. And you may have seen this clip that Trump put out yesterday, and he was walking tough up to the camera, and he said, I'm feeling great. But then he said something that was really ridiculous and absurd. He said, China gave me this virus and China's going to pay for it, you know. And it is so absurd and so moronic, you know, and it's just this idea that America somehow always has to have an enemy. We have to focus on the enemy of the day. And well, we can't do it with Russia because that was a Democrat enemy. We need our own enemy, and it's China. And it just really underscores the propagandization of the American people and of the political system.
You know, overall, you know, last night's debates probably will not change much of anything. I think if there is no debate and it gets canceled unilaterally, who wins that argument is significant. And I just think so far Trump's position is probably the right position, but it doesn't hardly touch on the subject of the role of government in our lives. You know, the role of government is still going to be growing. I was thinking about, you know, how long has this been going on? I know it's been going on all my life. When I look back at everything, it's been going on for 100 years. That, you know, they talk about this is the most important election ever. And it is pretty darn important. I don't want to belittle it because there's enough difference between the two. But the whole thing is, if you look at it in a different manner, like each election probably is going to determine the direction of the country. Is it going to become more free or less free? Yeah. And I would say, you know, especially since the turn into the 20th century, you know, 120 years ago, every election meant the government was going to get bigger. And spending is going to get greater. The debt was going to expand. The Federal Reserve would become more powerful. So they don't. But that's an issue that they're unconcerned about. But one of the reasons I think that is the case is everybody that's getting involved in this, you know, the people in the media and all the nonsense we have and the politicians and the bureaucrats have all been instructed about the Constitution and the role of government by government schools. Did you know that government schools tend to promote government?
Yeah.
You know, it's in their interest.
Yeah. Well, if we want to move on to something a little bit more bright, because we're getting a little bit down, there's an article we have. It's up on the Ron Paul Institute website, written by Ethan Yang of the American Institute for Economic Research. And he's going through three very important cases. The article is called The Constitutional Reckoning of State Lockdown Orders. And he discusses, first off, the most recent was just about a little under a week ago in Michigan, when their Supreme Court ruled that the governor, who had literally shut down everything in sight, that she was acting outside the law, and they overturned her ability to rule by decree after how many months of so doing. And he also talks about two other cases, which is Wisconsin, where there was a partial overthrow of the executive powers that was grabbed by the governor, and then also in Pennsylvania, where a U.S. federal judge ruled parts of that governor, Governor Wolf, one of the worst, his tyranny, they ruled unconstitutional. So the point that he's making, and it's an important one, yes, this is not the perfect way to solve the problem, but the wheels are turning slowly in the right direction.
No, I think they're very encouraging. I think also it makes the point that intellectual leadership is important. Numbers are important too. Majorities are important, but you don't change things by just, you know, railroading or pressuring or politicize and have propaganda where the dictatorship of the majority rules the day. In this case, you had some judges that came through that actually understood the Constitution. And this overrides, you know, the large majority right now in this country who doesn't even question all this authority. You know, I hope more people question the authority on how elections are run and you know, doing things unilaterally without even the cooperation that they agreed to. But no, I think these three cases means that more states should be doing it.
Yeah.
And we've had a little hint here in Texas, but we need a little bit more pressure, you know. And I see your favorite judge was in the news again yesterday, Hidalgo.
Yeah, and I have something about her later about what she's up to. But, you know, and you see, you see it a lot down here as well. Wear your mask in this store. It's the law. Well, actually, no, it's not the law, because the law is made by the legislatures. And unfortunately, as you you suggested earlier, our civics education in public schools is not really up to par. But, obviously legislatures make the law, not executives. There's a great piece by our good friend Judge Napolitano on Lou Rockwell today, and he points out, finally we have some freedom in Michigan. And I won't even read this list because we would be going on for 40 minutes, but the judge points out, basically Whitmer, that's their governor, made herself a one-woman government when she purported to both write the laws during the early days and to enforce them. A staggering series of executive orders. Put on a face mask, stay at home. Unless you're going to die, you can't get out of your house. Face masks, indoor, outdoor, everywhere. Stay away from everyone. She closed restaurants, food courts, cafes, coffee houses, bars, tavern, brew pub, nail salons, tattoo parlors, on and on and on. And this is what the judge says. In short, the governor of Michigan made up her own laws, reordered human life, displaced nearly all livelihoods, and trampled civil liberties on a scale not seen in America since the Civil War.
I wonder if they ever wake up with a little bit of remorse. I don't think so. The only remorse is that they didn't get as much power as they are really seeking. So it is a power struggle, and it is a philosophic issue. And they just believe that's the role of government, and people can't take care of themselves. So if we had something more clearly stated in these campaigns, that even though it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be radical, extreme libertarianism, and this is it, and it has to be tomorrow, versus the dictatorship that the other side's working through it. But if they just stated it in principle, we believe that free people, can take care of themselves better than people who are enslaved by bureaucrats and the people who enjoy it. If they could just get to that point of the discussion, but that's not it. It's always this detailed management. We're better managers of. We know how to spend the money, and also the only thing they come close to it, which should arouse people's concern, but it's a bipartisan agreement that deficits don't matter. You'd think that would be it. That there'd be some decent progressives and liberals, and not just a few libertarians. And sometimes the libertarians get a little sloppy on that too, and they don't emphasize debt and spending. Symbolizes government control. And if you want to live in a free country that's less likely to go to war thousands of miles away, there would be a difference. But I never hear that in the debates, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too much for people to swallow. They want to look at who's scowling at who.
Right.
But these three states that we're talking about, they were blue states. They had Democrat governors, did very, very badly. But it's a bipartisan rush for tyranny, and we saw what leadership looks like. Governor DeSantis in Florida recently said enough is enough. All of the orders are gone, completely open. You cannot give any more fines for no face masks. And actually, I just saw this morning he approved large stadium events in Florida. That's what leadership looks like. And here, unfortunately, is what leadership doesn't look like. Let's put up the next clip, a little closer to home. Here's our own inept governor, Governor Abbott. Here was his big thing. We talked about it yesterday. Oh, I'm going to have a great announcement later. Check out my Facebook page. Here's his big announcement. Texas bars can reopen to 50% capacity. But the decision is up to county judges, right? That's not leadership. Hey, if you want, you can, but I'm not going to do it. I think one of the other things is you can't sit down. You can't stand up. You have to sit down. And then here's the next one. So it's up to county judges. He just completely punts on this. And guess what? County judges. Here's Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo. No way, no reopening bars until the virus is under control. Forget this reopening stuff. She is the county judge for the city of Houston resides in, the third largest city in the U.S. And look at this next one. This is a great tweet. And he retweets Hidalgo saying no bar openings. And he retweets it not with rhetoric but with facts. Here is a current data on Harris County. The RT rate under 1.0 for 27 days. Positive rate under 5%. It's been at 3.2% for 27 days. New daily cases are flat. The COVID-19 general bed is at 4.8% of capacity. The COVID-19 ICU has been flat. It's at 116. It's been that way for 3 weeks. And Dr. Chris Summers asks, the justification to bankrupt bar owners on this data is so sad, and sad it is.
Have you ever thought about who does all the counting?
Yeah.
You know, if it's 50%, who's going to decide it's a restaurant that has 100 seats? Who's going to decide whether it's 49 or 51? Do they count every store? I think what they do is pretty typical of law enforcement and government, is get an example. Do it to a church. IRS plays these things. Have the most innocent, sympathetic person and say, we're going to do it. And they'll get kinds of like, that's why they'll try to make example of a bar and a church and all these other things. But it also means that people need to get a little bit of courage, but it's time consuming and there is a cost to it, but there's a cost to it if we don't do anything. There's a cost to the loss of liberty. Just think by being apathetic about the lockdowns, which are illegal. Now the courts are starting to rule that. What was the cost there? There's an economic cost on it, and there has not been a cost in more sickness. I mean, this whole idea that there'd be tremendous more sickness stuff, but there is an economic cost, people losing jobs, but there's an economic cost in loss of liberty.
Yes.
You know, how do you measure that? People have a hard time to put a dollar figure on your liberties, but that should be high on our list to let us make our own choices and live with our bad choices as well as our good choices. But no, that isn't the case. We have capitulated to allowing the bureaucrats to come in. Oh yeah, we'll send a counter over there. If you better hide them if you're at 52 people.
Yeah.
It's almost silly, you know. But they do it. They do it all the time. But they say, but that's good for jobs. We have more counters than ever before.
Yeah, really.
We'll pay them more money. In cities like San Francisco, some of the bureaucrats make a lot of money.
Yeah,
and then they wonder why they're broke.
Yeah. Well, you hit the exact right word, Dr. Paul, and that's courage. And that's what it takes. It takes courage. It takes people to stand up to these tyrants. And there's a little bit of it. In fact, we've got a little bit of that here in Lake Jackson. Every Saturday, there's a great group that gets out there in front of Walmart, and they protest, and they hold signs saying, "Open Texas," no mandatory mask. In fact, my own family, we got together Saturday morning, and everyone was having a great time. What do you think about this for a sign? What do you think about this? We made our own signs, and I wish there were more people out. It's a good group, but we need to have 5 or 6 times that many so that they pay attention. You know, this is our last show together of the week, Dr. Paul, so I do want to one more time remind our viewers of Dr. Paul's new mini book, The End of Unearned Opulence. We're giving this as a thank you gift for those who support the Ron Paul Institute, which produces the Ron Paul Liberty Report. I will put a link in the description on how you can make a contribution and get your own copy of Dr. Paul's exciting new book.
Very good. And I'm going to close by re-emphasizing something we've already talked about, and that is some of these state courts winning, our side winning, you know, Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and there's a lot more floating through there. You'd think there'd be a sweep across the country, but eventually there will be. People are getting sick and tired of this, and it's not in their benefit. And I think it's great that the president will take a bold stand when he has the opportunity to do it, because people just aren't dying because they've been allowed to talk to other people. And but there's still a lot of people that are very scared. I talked to them, and it's really. It really is so disappointing because they have been intimidated, and they have guilt consequences that, you know, if they contribute to it and somebody gets sick, and you know, that's understandable. But the whole thing is how many people's lives have been saved by lockdown? I personally don't believe there has been a net saving of lives by lockdown, and that I hear too many of the medical cases coming back of people missing their medical treatment because of this. So this whole idea that if you don't do this, and you know, look at the language they've used against Trump. You know, he killed him. He killed it. He's guilty of all these people dying. That is so much over the top. Maybe I have too much confidence in liberty, but the other choices aren't very good. There's every reason, if you look at history, current history, 100 years, 1,000 years, authoritarianism is not a good option for people if they want to live their own life and enjoy it. And I think the freer the society, the better it is. The more prosperity there is, it satisfies people intellectually and spiritually. There's so many benefits. Our founders understood this, and they gave us a good introduction to it. Far from perfect, but a good and probably the best ever. But it didn't last a long time, and it's been whittled away. But instead of saying, this is the end, we'll never see a drop of liberty left again, I'm not at that point. I like to look at those three states that have moved in the right direction, and that we need a lot more people doing that, because I think this will be a very welcome, contagious problem, and that is people waking up and they love liberty. Let's spread the message of liberty. That's the epidemic that I'm looking forward to. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.